Hello guys, this is Axter speaking from the Players Council, and today I would like to share a couple Free People's tips. In my opinion, a lot of people do not use the full potential there is of the Free Peoples, and today I'm going to show you that Free Peoples is much stronger than Shadow for various reasons, because there are ways in which you can play very efficiently and survive way longer than you normally probably do. Now let's take a look at the first point. So the key thing is that whenever you play Free Peoples against Shadow, you need to maximize what you do in every situation. That means if your opponent is trying to kill you by wounds, you need to have your companions ready and healthy to survive another side. Or if he plays Corruption, when their wounds and strength are not going to be as crucial as the resistance of your ring bearer, for instance. That means, to give you an example, here I'm playing my Free Peoples against opponent's Uruks, and I'm about to heal at side 6, that is the Sanctuary. It means I get to heal 5 wounds from my companions. Now, what do a lot of people do? Oh, look at Frodo, he has got 4 wounds, I need to click on him as many times as it is necessary to make him look better. But they don't really think about the consequences. So let's break this out. My opponent plays Uruks. That means his minions are by default damage +1. I have no cards that would mitigate that fact. That means that I need to make my companions have at least 3 vitality to survive a skirmish against an Uruk. So let's take a look at what I do. 1 heal for Sam, because he has 3 vitality now. 2 heals for Gimli, he has 3 vitality as well. And 2 heals for Frodo. So this is a very important thing, because if I hadn't done that, then let's say he plays an Uruk, and the Uruk is a basic 8 or 9 strength minion. I have to assign him to one of my companions, and Frodo can take it, but what if there's another Uruk? If these 2 guys were, or if they had 2 vitality only and not 3, they would not survive even the first fight. Doing it like this, I now am able to survive my opponent's Uruk, or he has to put extra effort in killing my companions, which is what I do, which is what I want. I always want to maximize what I do to prevent my opponent's Shadow strategy from winning. So that is the basic rule. Another thing that people underestimate a lot is that some Shadow cultures generally do not have buffs. Here we are on side 2 and my opponent plays Nazgul. There are 0 Twilight tokens in the pool. That means that my opponent cannot play any buffs. So you might go, oh Jesus, Witch King, he's 16 strength, I need to do something about it. Well, you don't. You just need to assign him to Gandalf, who is 9 strength at this point. But be careful, if you kill, for example, Legolas, that's probably not going to happen, but if you did that, that would mean that Gandalf goes down to 8 strength only, since he can no longer spot an elf to be 9 strength in total. So I'm going to assign it like this. Witch King to Gandalf and Cantea to Legolas. So that's very important to do, because I always need to save as much as possible. Especially against Nazgul, Greenleaf is not going to do much, so it's okay if I let him die sooner or later. But it's not a good idea to kill companions as fast as possible, because if you think about it, the Nazgul are very expensive in Fellowship block, even though there are cards like Morgul Gates, which make them cheaper, and double moves usually allow the Shadow player to play 2 or maybe 3 Nazgul, and that is quite dangerous. But the fact is that your opponent is going to play fewer minions than you have companions. It's not a swarm strategy. In fact, it's not even a wounding strategy. It's sort of a stopping Shadow, we can say. So how you are going to survive that is that you keep as many companions alive, and you just cycle them out. I would call it that way. That means that you kill, for example, Sam who is exhausted because you are not going to need him anymore and he doesn't bring any value to the table. But from the rest of the fellowship you are going to squeeze out as much as possible before they go down, so that you can then replace them by fresh new companions such as Boromir. But if you do that too early, then the companions that you replace them with are going to suffer earlier, and the game just might not necessarily have to work out for you. Let's take a look at the rest of the skirmish. Here I assign Aragorn and Gandalf again. Why not Greenleaf? Because if I put Cantea on Legolas, that would mean that the blade tip would get placed on him, and in my next fellowship phase he would go down, which is what I don't want to see, especially in a healing strategy where I can easily remove the wounds of my companions. So that's another tip. Be mindful of what your opponents have in their respected races. If they play, for example, Nazgul, then they need at least one Twilight token in the Twilight pool to be able to buff their minions, to pump them up in the skirmish phase. So how does it work with the wounds? Now we get back to the first situation. So how does it work with the wounds when it comes to Swarm? Well, it's the opposite scenario. If your opponent plays Swarm, that means that he's trying to put a lot of minions on the board. Then if you have one fully healed companion, it's not going to help you too much. It means that you need to heal each companion at least once on the sanctuary side, because your opponent can put 2 minions on one of your companions, and he can choose which companion that is once he has achieved Swarm on the board. So he would probably go for killing the wounded ones, so that his Swarm gets even more stronger, if you know what I mean. So you need to avoid that. You need to keep all companions as healthy as possible, so at minimum heal each companion once. And that is the opposite to what we talked about with the Uruk strategy, where you want rather one fully healed companion rather than a lot of them healed just once. So that is the general rule. Know what your opponent is playing and heal your companions accordingly, so that you can live longer. So that was the Twilight pool. Now the next very important thing is that you need to be aware of what's out there in the format. I prepared 5 cards, which I named the Boo cards of Movie Block. So whenever you are playing, or you even build your deck, you need to be careful about not running into situations which might cost you the game or just make you suffer greatly. One of those examples could be having 4 cultures on the board. Now realistically, what happens in that situation? Unless you have a way to deal with Grima, and there aren't many ways how to deal with him, except for perhaps Terrible and Evil by Gandalf, then he's going to return not 1 but 2 companions to your hand. I'm going to show you what it looks like in real life situation. So let's say that you have, it's not really relevant, but something like something like this on board, Frodo with the ring, and let's put one more companion out there, and nope, for example, Bilbo like this. It doesn't really matter, but your opponent plays Grima, and you go, okay, well, I've got more than 1 culture, that's bad, but what he's going to do, he's of course, let's actually remove this, he's not going to put into your hand Aragorn, that would be a nonsense. First, he's going to put into your hand Bilbo, because he can then still spot 4 cultures, and then he's going to put into your hand the 4th culture companion. So that's very bad for you, because typically people run this Grima in a deck where they want their Swarm to be very good, to be more efficient. So when the opponent is greedy and he plays too many cultures, he's going to put Grima on board, remove 2 companions off the board and probably kill you on that side. So that's one of the examples. Another example, still Grima, is when you have one of those very strong companions, typically from the Dwarven culture. Let's take a look at the possessions. By the way, have you guys seen the new design of the deck builder? In my opinion, it is definitely great piece of work by the Players Council, because now it is much more accessible. The layout in general looks very good, and of course there are some complications with some of the cards, how they work, but they are going to figure it out very soon, and I see it as a huge step forward for the Lord of the Rings community of the Lord of the Rings trading card game in 2024 and following years. So let's take a look at this. This is our Durin, this is all that he's got on, and your opponent doesn't like that, because he plays, for example, Uruks. Uruks normally don't like these super big companions because it is very difficult to deal with them. Even if you have something like Troop of Uruk-hai, Durin is still going to be bigger because of his natural passive ability. So you put Grima on board. Usually you run that in your deck, as I said, because you don't like big companions with lots of equipment, and you just put everything back to his hand. So that's too bad for you, because firstly, you are not going to draw into shadow cards in your next regroup phase or at the end of the turn, because you will have all these things in your hand. That's not what you want. You want shadow to stop your opponent or to kill him or whatever. So being greedy as this is always going to backfire on you, so you need to keep it a little bit more civilized, let's say. Not so greedy as in the situation that I showcased here. This is still good, because even though you have 3 cards, 3 people goes first in each phase. So you use the ring, you put something into your hand, you fall back down into 2 cards. If your opponent even plays Grima, if he doesn't, well, good for you, because then you can keep the ring on, and Durin is 14 strength. That's very good for you. Now another example is, if you pay too much Twilight, then your opponent is going to kill you by Sauron. So a typical situation, how that happens, this and this, and of course the notorious name contains, let's go with saved, yes, saved from the fire. I've already mentioned it in the previous videos, but let's take a look at it again. So if you use saved from the fire, you put this companion into that pile, you put these 3 companions into your hand, and you play them immediately. Well, I messed that up actually. It's not supposed to be Ant Horde, it's supposed to be, of course, Skimbark. There you go, much better. So you put this, this and this into your hand. You play this, you play this, you play this, and in the Twilight pool there's going to be 6, 10, plus 5 is 15, plus 3 is 18, plus 5 companions which are moving, and plus the site. So there's definitely going to be enough for Sauron. If your opponent plays that and you don't have stuff or another way how to deal with him, you are going to lose 2 of the companions. So naturally, Sauron is a great answer to the saved from the fire decks, because you can just punish the Twilight they put in the pool early in the game. But you need to probably run 4 copies of him, so that you increase the chance of your opponent getting punished for his saved from the fire. But it's also not such a great idea to play him 4 times, because you need space in your deck. And if you play like 40 cards and you put 4 copies of Sauron, it's not going to improve your statistic chances of drawing him, because the deck is huge and you are going to lose most of your other games because you play such a huge deck. The draw is not going to be consistent for you. So you usually run like 2 copies of him in decks like Ninja Gollum in order to have some chance of keeping these decks in line. but it is not your primary response. You can also play him when your opponent moves twice. There's usually enough Twilight for Sauron in that situation. Another thing is Anquia. Very simple situation. So you've got your unbeatable fellowship of 6 wonderful thematic companions, but where are these guys? Okay, this and this, for example. Of course, there's something better. So you play this, amazing. You put all the necessary cards on Eomer, like Firefoot and his spear and bow and armor and I don't know what. And then your opponent plays Anquia and kills Eomer with all the stuff he's bearing. So you've lost your most important companion because you had this guy on board or this guy on board. Now imagine this. You have that big Eomer, maybe with 2 cards only to be able to withstand Grima, and then your opponent plays Anquia and you kill him in a skirmish, just like that. Nothing happens. Much better. That means keep the number of companions under control, because Anquia is a very simple answer to that. If you are greedy with the amount of companions you have on board, then you are going to lose the most important one and lose the game because of it. Not worth it. The last thing that I'm going to show you, my personal favorite minion, is Shelob. It's very good for decks which are heavily reliant on one companion. A good example are dwarves. The fellowship typically looks something like this, and Gimli with a ring. Okay, so your opponent plays these 2 guys. On side 5, for example, he prevents Durin from being assigned to skirmish until the end of the turn, and then Linar and Gimli both have to go to skirmish, which is bad. For example, even when this is on board, that's even worse for you, because not only are you going to use or have to use Gimli's assignment ability 2 times, but also Gollum is going to win 2 times. And usually the important stuff which you had on Durin is going to be useless because he cannot be even assigned to skirmish. So you need to have fellowships which are not so reliant on one companion, or Shelob is going to take it apart. It's very important to keep in mind. Make it more versatile, universal, and able to withstand various shadows with all your companions on board. Alright, so those are the Boo cards. Now, in the past I mentioned the deck types, that is the balanced deck, the all-in shadow deck, and the free people's oriented deck. Now, how to play against those from the perspective of fellowship. So let's take a look at the all-in shadow strategy. What I said is typical for this kind of deck is that it is going to try to kill you. The free people's there is only as a support. It is going to try to kill you and not run for the 9th side. So you shouldn't really worry about your opponent winning the game by surviving the 9th side, because it's all about his shadow. So take it slow, get some setup, because once the minions stop being roaming, then the show begins and you need to be ready. So you want to have, I don't know, Aragorn, Ranger from the north on board. You want to have, for example, Greenleaf on board. You want to have Sam in case Frodo dies due to Swarm. All that stuff being on board is going to increase your chance of surviving it. So don't try to run too fast like a madman. That's why I sometimes don't get why people run so fast to side 3, even though they don't know what I'm playing. Then they die on side 4 because they just have like 4 companions and 1 possession. And in my free peoples, there's nothing easier. I just play 0. I put no Twilight into the Twilight pool. My opponent is stuck with 8 shadow cards in his hand, typically, or something like that. He doesn't, He doesn't recycle his hand, and then I kill him that much easier because he hasn't built his setup yet. So identify what your opponent is playing and always adjust your gameplay accordingly, or you are going to die very fast and not even know what happened to you. The free people's oriented build, on the other hand, is specific for its tendency to win the game by running for the 9th side. That means that you are going to probably kill it by running there first. But a smart pair with that kind of deck is usually something that is able to stop you as the opponent of this free people's oriented build. So what you can do against that is the opposite case scenario. Whenever you see some strong free peoples such as this, consisting of many ways how to kill the minions and move twice, then there's a very high chance, if your opponent had built the deck in an optimal way, that he's going to try to win the game by running to the 9th side. That means that you should run fast on the first 5 sides before his shadow gets any setup and before he draws important cards to stop you, and then you can take it slower. But if you don't do that, if you are slow at the beginning, your opponent is going to develop his stopping cards in his shadow, and his free peoples is going to build setup to move twice much easier than you, and that's how you are going to lose the game. So you need to push fast at the beginning and then make it a little bit slower in the second half of the game. That's how you play against this build. And of course, in the meantime, you try to kill these free peoples, but usually the free peoples oriented build are unkillable unless the person, of course, plays in a suboptimal way, and therefore you can rather defeat it by getting to the 9th side first. That's what can happen. It is very rare to kill a fellowship like this. Then the last of the decks is the balanced deck. Now this is the most difficult deck to defeat. It's not impossible. I would say if 2 players play in an optimal way, there are about the same percentages of who is going to come out at the top at the end of the game as for the free people's oriented build and the shadow all-in build. But typically what happens is that these decks, the balanced decks, are very consistent. They are able to win by the free people's side and by the shadow side as well. So if the player messes up the free people's, he's usually still able to win by the shadow. So let's say that 2 balanced decks meet on the battlefield at the same time. It could be this deck versus, for example, I don't know, Ents and Southerns, that for example. So how you win that game is that you try to be as efficient as possible. You try to make double moves, even though it might cost you a companion or 2 at some times, but you really need to try to make as many free double moves as possible, and you need to punish your opponent's double moves, because killing these free peoples, if it moves once, it's probably not going to happen, no matter what you play. And surviving this, if you run like a madman, is also not going to happen, no matter what you play. Again, the same situation. That's why it's a balanced deck. It means it does its job well, no matter what your opponent is playing. So I really like games like that, and usually that is what you see in high-level events, because the players just want the best chance to be at the top of the tournament. They never know who they are going to face in all the situations, since it's randomized. You don't know who the winner is going to be. So taking something like this is very popular, because you have 2 ways how to win the game. That's for one. And secondly, if you mess something up, then the second half of the deck is going to cover up for it. So that's why they are so popular. And really the deciding factor in a game like that is who makes less mistakes. I don't really think that draw is that important. Many people say that, but it's not. It's what you do with the cards that you are given. And a lot of people usually blame everything on draw, but it's not true. It's their mistakes, their inability to see through the game, what happened, them not discarding enough cards in regroup phase to draw to the more important cards. So those are the things that lose games, and many people underestimate that. So that is something that I mentioned and I would like to address as well, and that is discarding card at each regroup phase. So no matter what you play, I'm going to repeat this probably a couple times in the future. You always need to discard a card in regroup phase or at the end of the turn whenever there's a chance to do that. Because let's say that you hold in your hand something like this, this and this. We need 8 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, something like this. So you have just finished your fellowship phase and you want to discard something, but you have 1 Nazgul, so it's good. And what if your opponent plays 6 companions? He has 4 now on board, so this could come in handy. And also, Golem is such a great minion, so if I play him now, then it's going to be very good for me. And then on the next side, I can use my captured by the ring. So I keep all the shadow cards. Now, my opponent plays nothing. I'm barely able to put on board Golem, and then I draw, for example, Bilferne. Now I have to go on side 4. Well, that's bad, because I have no free people's cards, and my opponent will slowly start killing me. Well then, I need this, because my opponent has to finally play something. Well, he plays nothing. So I put on board this, this and this, just to put something out there. Okay, well then, I draw, for example, this, and this, and this. So, now I have to move to the 5th side. That's even worse, that's Steward's Tomb. That's a lot of Twilight, and I have no free people's cards. But imagine if I had that done earlier, I would have had 2 cards more now, and I would finally, thanks to that, draw Aragorn, Ranger of the North, and I would draw, for example, Sam. It's very typical that that happens. And now there's even the chance to see what cards you would draw after the game is over. So do that from time to time to see what would have happened, because statistics in this game really tells a very precise tale of what would have happened. And this is typically what happens if you don't discard cards. Everything is replaceable in your hand. I'm not going to say any unless, because then people would go like, oh okay, there's probably some exception and that's what happened to me. No. You need to really understand the game on a very, very, very high level to be able to efficiently keep cards in your hand, because otherwise it's going to cost you a lot of games. There are 2 more things which I'm going to address. The first one is the amount of cards in deck. As you could have seen in a couple of decks which I have shown on this channel, my maximum limit would be something like 37 cards per deck, because if it gets more, then it usually messes up the statistics of the deck. Maybe you put there Sauron, so let's just put in there. Ooh, okay, he's not a companion, not at all. So amazing. Now my opponent, if he plays Saved from the Fire, well, it's great, because I can kill his ants, but I'm never going to draw that one Sauron. So I put 4 there. Well, that's amazing. But then my opponent plays Choke, and I draw 2 or 3 Saurons. And if I want to discard something which I don't need, I cannot, because I'm holding a Sauron. So it's bad as well. So ideally, you want to go as low as possible with the amount of cards which you have in Free Peoples and in Shadow. If you don't do that, your statistics is going to suck. I really hate these decks when people play like all cards in the format. It's like 365 cards in Free Peoples and 365 cards in Shadow, and then they win a couple of games because they just spent like 2 hours thinking about it, but they are never going to win a tournament. They are perhaps going to kill one guy randomly, but they are just going to mess up somebody's points in a tournament, and they are never going to achieve anything with that sort of build. So if you play a lot of cards, you better have a maximal way to cycle them out and draw something very fast. Like at least 12 cards in your deck should be something that draws cards if you exceed the limit of 40 cards, because otherwise you are going to get stuck. Your hand is permanently going to look like trash, and that's not good for your deck. And the last thing that I'm going to say is the starting fellowship. So here we start with Pippin and Merry and Greenleaf and Smeagol and Frodo. It's a very resilient 3P+, especially on movie, because if something bad happens, some bad minion gets on board, well then you can, for example, I don't know, sacrifice Merry, or you can add a lot of burdens so that you can then well, what I wanted to say is that burdens are less of a danger than losing half of your fellowship. So it's very resilient, and it's able to withstand a lot of force that your opponent puts upon you at the start of the game, so you can be ready for whatever situation. And that's something what you want to expect from your starting fellowship whenever you are building a deck. You need to actually be able to survive the game. That should make sense. That's one of the key things. So keep that in mind, that your fellowship should look resilient at the start. Complaining about how Customer is broken is not going to solve the trick. You just need to build it smart. Because what happens here if your opponent plays Customer on side 2 or 3? Well then, one arrow and the second arrow and then 2 wounds from Pippin and he's dead. No problem. Well, what else can my opponent play? He can play, for example, Gollum with They Stole It. Nice. Add 1 burden and I cancel or I prevent all wounds. Nice. Etc. So your 3P+, your starting fellowship should always be able to withstand a lot of force at the start of the game or in the early stage. We are talking about the first 4 sides. And then usually you already have some setup and you can sacrifice a couple of those companions which you started with originally, and you can replace them by stronger ones. That's the principle upon which Saved from the Fire decks work, that they sacrifice the weaker companions in order to make their stronger ones shine as fast as possible. Alright, and that's about it from the 3P+ tips which I prepared for today, and next week I'm going to focus on the shadow tips in general. Thanks and peace.